Okay, so let's talk about Ferdinand Magellan. We all know the name, right? He's the guy who first sailed all the way around the world. At least, that's the story we're all told. But the truth? Oh, it is so much more complicated and honestly way more dramatic. Because the man who gets all the credit for circling the globe never actually made it home.
And that's the big question, isn't it? How does the captain of the most famous voyage in history end up dead on some remote island thousands of miles from where he was supposed to be? Well, the answer is a wild story of betrayal, mutiny, starvation, and one single fatal miscalculation.
So here he is, Ferdinand Magellan, a brilliant, visionary Portuguese navigator. But just look at that caption for a second. Born in Portugal, died in the Philippines. Not Spain, where his epic journey finally ended. Not his home country. And right there, that's our first huge clue that the triumphant story we all know is missing a really tragic ending.
To really get how he ended up there, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. Because before this voyage even started, Magellan was already a man in conflict, with an idea so bold, so audacious, it pretty much got him kicked out of his own country.
You see, Magellan was a seriously skilled naval officer for Portugal. And he had this radical plan to get to the super-rich Spice Islands by sailing west through the Americas instead of the usual route east around Africa. But his own king, Manuel I, just shot him down again and again. So Magellan did the unthinkable. He gave up his Portuguese citizenship and took his crazy idea to Portugal's #1 rival, Spain.
And this really gets to the heart of the conflict. Back then, Portugal basically had a monopoly on the spice trade. They controlled the known Eastern Sea route around Africa, and it was making them ridiculously wealthy. But Magellan was convinced there had to be a secret back door, a westward passage through the Americas. And when his own king wouldn't bite, the King of Spain was more than happy to fund a super high-risk voyage that could totally shatter Portugal's grip on the whole trade.
And so, with Spanish money in his pocket, Magellan put together his fleet. He called it the Armada de Molucca. And let me tell you, this wasn't just some voyage. It was a leap into the complete and utter unknown. Basically, a suicide mission.
The initial setup was huge. They had 5 ships, a crew of about 270 men from all over Europe, and enough supplies to last for 2 whole years. They set off from Spain in 1519 with one and only one goal: find that western route to the Spice Islands. Now, I want you to remember these numbers because they're about to change dramatically.
Yeah, the trouble started almost right away. I mean, long before they even got close to the Pacific, the whole expedition nearly fell apart. The Spanish captains under his command, who kind of hated their Portuguese boss, launched a full-on mutiny. Magellan had to be absolutely brutal to put it down. Then, one of his ships, the Santiago, was completely wrecked in a storm. And to make everything even worse, another ship, the San Antonio, just gave up, turned around, and sailed back to Spain, taking a huge chunk of their supplies with it.
After finally finding a way through that treacherous strait at the tip of South America, we call it the Strait of Magellan now, they entered this vast, calm ocean. Magellan was so relieved he named it the Mar Pacifico, the Peaceful Sea. He, and literally all of European science at the time, thought Asia was just a few days away. They were catastrophically wrong. The crossing took 98 agonizing days. Food was gone. Water turned putrid, and the horrifying disease of scurvy just tore through the crew.
30. Just think about that. 30 men died on that one leg of the journey alone. They got so desperate they were eating sawdust, leather strips they tore off the rigging, even rats. The Peaceful Sea had become a floating graveyard.
I mean, just look at this map. The sheer scale of what they were up against is just staggering. That single line crosses this immense blue void. Nobody in Europe had any clue how big the Pacific Ocean really was. They were literally sailing off the map into a world so much larger than anyone had ever imagined.
After more than 3 months of absolute hell, they finally hit land in the Philippines. Food, fresh water, friendly people. It must have seemed like the worst was finally over. But it was right here, right on the edge of success, that Magellan would make his final and fatal mistake.
At first, things went incredibly well. Magellan struck up a powerful alliance with Raja Humabon, the king of an island called Cebu. He even managed to convert the king and thousands of his people to Christianity, planting this huge cross as a symbol of his success. He finally had a friendly base, and he was so close to his final goal, the Spice Islands. But to seal the deal with his new ally, Magellan made a fateful offer. He said he would personally lead an attack on his ally's rival, a chieftain named Lapu-Lapu, on the nearby island of Mactan. He was overconfident, you know. He thought his European armor and weapons would make it an easy win. He didn't need to fight this battle. It was a local dispute. But he chose to.
The attack was a total disaster. Magellan's men were vastly outnumbered. He got wounded in the arm and then the leg, and soon he was surrounded and killed by Lapu-Lapu's warriors. The expedition's eyewitness historian Antonio Pigafetta wrote that heartbreaking line, "You can just feel the crew's devastation." The brilliant commander who had survived everything, mutiny, storms, starvation, was gone.
So Magellan was dead. But the mission wasn't. The few survivors still had to get home, and in doing that, they would accidentally complete the journey he started. But first, they would try to completely destroy the memory of the man who led them there.
And this is the Victoria. Of those 5 ships that sailed out of Spain 3 years earlier, this was the only one to make it back. Captained now by a man named Juan Sebastian Elcano. Packed with valuable spices, it just limped back into a Spanish harbor in 1522.
And the human cost? It was just almost unbelievable. Remember those numbers? 270 men departed, only 18 came back. The very first trip around the world was one of the deadliest voyages in history. The survival rate was less than 7%. But here's the final, cruelest twist in the whole story. The men who came back, including the new captain, Elcano, they had been part of that original mutiny. So, to save their own skins and avoid being executed for treason, they told the Spanish king a story. They said Magellan was a brutal tyrant who went rogue and led them all to ruin. For a while, the man who dreamed up the whole thing was officially remembered as a traitor.
Magellan's reputation was saved by one loyal man, Antonio Pigafetta. He wasn't invited to tell the king his story, but he had kept this incredibly detailed journal of the entire voyage. And when he finally got it published, his first-hand account of Magellan's genius and his struggles completely destroyed the mutineers' lies and finally set the historical record straight. Which leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? History is never that simple. Magellan had the vision and the guts to make the voyage happen, but his own pride got him killed. Elcano, on the other hand, actually completed the mission, but only after he tried to sabotage it. So what really defines a hero? Is it the person with the revolutionary idea? Or is it just about being the last one standing?